He offered warmth to a stranger, but ancient tribal law made her his forever. Elias walked slowly along the forest path, his breath forming little clouds in the cold morning air. The snow crunched beneath his boots, and the pale sunlight barely touched the frost-covered trees. He had been traveling for hours, moving from village to village, carrying his small bag of herbs and remedies. He loved helping people with natural medicines, but today something felt different. The forest was unusually quiet, almost as if it were holding its breath. As he rounded a bend, he saw something that made him stop in his tracks. By the edge of a small clearing, huddled under a leafless tree, was a young woman. She was shivering violently, her thin cloak doing little to protect her from the icy wind. Her face was pale, almost as if she had not eaten in days, and her dark hair was tangled with bits of frost. Elias's heart tightened. He had seen many travelers in need, but something about her presence felt fragile, almost otherworldly. Without thinking, he took off his thick woolen coat and carefully wrapped it around her shoulders. "Are you all right?" he asked softly, kneeling beside her. She looked up at him with wide eyes, but she didn't speak. Her lips trembled, and her hands were pressed tightly against her chest, as if she were trying to hold herself together. Elias noticed that her eyes, though filled with fear, also held a strange curiosity, as if she were observing everything with sharp awareness. "Don't worry," he said gently. "You're safe now. Just stay warm, okay?" He reached into his bag and pulled out a small bundle of dried herbs, making a simple tea to help her warm up from the inside. He poured hot water carefully, the steam rising and filling the air with a sweet, calming scent. The woman watched silently, her hands hovering over the cup, hesitant. Slowly she accepted it, her fingers brushing against his. Elias felt a small spark of connection, though he didn't fully understand why. As she sipped the tea, Elias looked around, scanning the forest. There were no signs of other travelers, and the tracks in the snow suggested she had come alone. "How did you end up here?" he asked, trying to sound casual. She shook her head, her dark eyes avoiding his. He could tell she was scared, but there was also a quiet strength about her, a resilience that seemed to fight against the cold and the fear. Elias knew he couldn't leave her here. The forest was vast, and even though he was a seasoned traveler, he understood how dangerous it could be for someone unfamiliar with the land. "Come on," he said finally. "I can't leave you here. You'll catch your death out in this cold. I'll help you get somewhere warm." She hesitated, her gaze flicking toward the trees as if weighing some invisible rule. After a moment, she nodded slowly, and Elias offered her his hand. She took it, her grip surprisingly strong despite her trembling. The walk to the nearest village was quiet. Elias noticed how she moved carefully, her steps deliberate, almost as if she were used to navigating hidden paths. He tried to make conversation, asking simple questions about her name or where she came from, but she remained mostly silent. Every now and then she would glance at him, and he would catch a glimpse of a small, sad smile before she looked away again. Finally, after what felt like hours, they reached a small clearing where smoke rose from chimneys, signaling the presence of a village. Elias felt relief. "We're almost there," he said softly. A woman's eyes widened at the sight of the village, and for a moment she seemed both anxious and curious. He led her to the edge of the village, careful to keep her hidden from prying eyes until he could figure out the safest way to help her. As they entered, the villagers began to notice them. Children stopped playing in the snow, and adults paused their work to stare. Elias could feel their curious, cautious eyes, but he didn't let it distract him. He focused on keeping the woman calm, gently guiding her to a small inn at the center of the village. The innkeeper, an elderly man with kind eyes, immediately offered blankets and hot food. When Elias explained the situation, the woman whose name he finally learned was Ayana allowed herself to relax slightly for the first time. She sipped the warm broth, her hands wrapping around the cup as if drawing strength from it. Elias watched her carefully, noting how her shoulders had begun to loosen and how the shivering had lessened. There was still an air of mystery around her, a quiet tension that he couldn't quite place. Later that evening, Elias sat by the fire with Ayana, still wrapped in blankets. "You must be freezing," he said gently. "I'm glad I found you." She looked at him, her dark eyes reflecting the firelight. For a brief moment she seemed on the verge of speaking, but then she shook her head, remaining silent. Elias didn't push. He knew she would speak when she was ready. As the fire crackled, Elias thought about the day's events. It was strange how one simple act, offering warmth to someone in need, could change everything. He had no idea what lay ahead, no understanding of the rules and traditions that governed the life of this mysterious woman. Yet, in that moment, he felt a deep sense of purpose, a connection that went beyond words. Night fell, and the village became quiet. Elias remained by the fire, keeping an eye on Ayana as she slept, wrapped in layers of blankets. He wondered about her past, about the journey that had brought her to this cold forest alone. There was something about her that seemed tied to the land itself, as if she belonged to the mountains and the trees in a way that he could never fully understand. For the first time in a long while, Elias felt both hope and uncertainty. Hope that he could help someone in need, and uncertainty about the future that now lay before him. Little did he know that this simple act of kindness, offering warmth to a stranger, was about to change his life in ways he could never imagine. Ancient traditions, hidden rules, and a connection deeper than either of them could comprehend were waiting just around the corner, ready to shape the course of their lives forever. Elias closed his eyes for a moment, listening to the gentle snow falling outside, and made a silent promise. He would protect her, help her, and stand by her no matter what. The forest had already tested his courage, and he knew that the real journey was only beginning. The morning sun rose slowly over the village, its golden rays melting the frost on the rooftops. Elias awoke to the soft sound of birds chirping and the distant murmur of villagers starting their day. He looked over at Ayana, still asleep under the blankets, her face peaceful for the first time since he had found her in the forest. A small smile touched his lips. Somehow, despite the cold, the fear, and the mystery surrounding her, he felt a sense of calm. After a light breakfast of bread and warm tea prepared by the innkeeper, Elias gently suggested they visit the village square. "It's important you meet some of the people here," he said. Ayana nodded silently, her dark eyes thoughtful, and rose with quiet grace. The villagers had begun to stir, curious eyes following them as they walked down the cobbled streets. Children peeked from behind doors, and some of the elders whispered quietly among themselves. As they reached the center of the village, an elder stepped forward. He was a tall man with silver hair tied back neatly and eyes that seemed to see far more than they should. His gaze settled on Ayana, and Elias noticed a mixture of relief and concern in his expression. "Welcome," the elder said, his voice firm but kind. "You are safe here, but you must understand something before you stay." Elias frowned slightly, sensing the seriousness in the elder's tone. "Of course, please tell me." The elder's eyes softened as they shifted toward Ayana. "In our tribe there is an ancient law. It is very old, older than memory. It says that anyone who gives warmth or food to a lost member of our people is bound to them forever, not by choice, not by agreement, but by the law itself." Elias felt his stomach tighten, He had known this village had traditions, but he had never imagined anything like this. I don't understand, he stammered. Bound forever? The elder nodded solemnly. Yes. If someone is lost and you give them safety and warmth, the bond is created. It cannot be undone. This is how we honor and protect our people. And now, young traveler, you have offered that warmth to Ayanna. Elias felt a mixture of shock, confusion, and worry. He had acted out of kindness, simply wanting to help someone in need, and now it seemed that his entire life might be affected. He looked at Ayanna, who was standing silently beside him. Her expression was calm, almost unreadable, but he sensed that she understood what had been said. I didn't know, he said quietly. I was only trying to help. The elder gave a faint smile.
We know. That is why you are not in danger.
But the law is clear. You must accept the bond. The question is whether your heart can do the same. Elias's mind raced. He had never thought of himself as someone who would be bound by law to another person. He valued freedom, independence, and the ability to travel wherever he pleased. And yet, looking at Ayanna now, he felt a pull he could not explain. There was something about her quiet strength, the way she had endured the forest alone, that made him admire her deeply. Ayanna finally spoke, her voice soft but firm. Alias, the law, it is true. I cannot deny it. But I cannot deny what you did for me. You saved me. I will not forget it. She paused, glancing down at her hands. You do not owe me anything. But now the law says we are linked. You must decide if you are willing to stay. Elias swallowed hard. I don't know what to say. I never imagined something like this could happen to me. The elder nodded understandingly. It is not easy. No one chooses the law. It chooses you. But it is also a gift. To be bound means to care, to protect, and to share life with someone in a way that few people ever experience. Many who have been bound come to find that their lives are richer, deeper, and more meaningful than they ever expected. Elias looked around at the village, at the people who had watched silently, and felt a strange warmth. Perhaps there was wisdom in this ancient law, a way to strengthen bonds between people that modern life often overlooked. He turned to Ayanna, and for the first time he allowed himself to see her, not just as a stranger, but as someone whose presence had changed his life already. I will try, he said finally. I cannot say I fully understand, but I will honor the bond. I will stay, and I will do my best to respect your life and your people. Ayanna's eyes softened slightly, and she gave a small nod. Then we begin together, she said simply. There was no joy in her words, only acceptance. But Elias felt a quiet hope blooming inside him. The elder smiled and gestured for them to follow him. He led them to a circle of villagers waiting near the central fire. Before the bond is fully recognized, you must undergo certain rites, he explained. These rites are not just tests. They are a way for you to understand our ways, to prove your intentions, and to prepare for life as a bonded pair. The rituals would take time, he realized, and they would be challenging. But he felt ready. If his act of kindness had brought him to this place, then perhaps the journey ahead, however uncertain, was part of the path he was meant to follow. The first trial was simple in concept, but difficult in execution. Elias was asked to spend a night alone in the forest, armed only with a small bundle of herbs and a knife. He had to survive and find his way back without assistance. The villagers watched as he left, the cold wind biting at his face, and Elias felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. Ayana had already begun her own preparation, gathering items and meditating quietly near the village center. He knew that his success would affect not only him, but her as well. That night, Elias faced challenges he had not anticipated. The snow was deeper than he had imagined. The trees seemed endless, and strange noises echoed around him. He built a small fire, used his knowledge of herbs to treat minor injuries from thorns, and carefully marked his path so he could return. Exhausted but determined, he finally made it back to the village as the first light of dawn touched the peaks. The villagers greeted him with nods of respect, and Ayana gave him a quiet smile. Over the next few days, Elias began learning the ways of the village. He helped gather firewood, learned to identify plants used for medicine and food, and listened to the elders speak of their history and customs. With each task, he felt himself growing closer to Ayana, not just because of the law that bound them, but because of a shared respect and understanding. They began to speak more freely, exchanging small stories of their pasts, their hopes, and their fears. Elias noticed the way Ayana's eyes lit up when she spoke of her childhood in the mountains, the lessons she had learned from the elders, and the pride she felt in her people. He admired her deeply. She, in turn, began to see him as more than just a stranger who had saved her. She saw his compassion, his patience, and his willingness to embrace the unknown. Slowly, the bond between them shifted from obligation to something more personal, something that might one day grow into trust and friendship. The villagers watched this quietly, their eyes filled with curiosity and approval. They had seen many who came to the village out of necessity, only to leave when the challenges of tradition became too great. Elias, however, seemed different. He was learning, adapting, and showing genuine care for Ayana and the community. By the end of the week, Elias realized how much his life had already changed. The village no longer felt foreign, the people no longer distant, and Ayana no longer simply a mysterious stranger. They were connected in ways that he could not fully explain, and though he still had much to learn, he felt a quiet excitement for the journey ahead. That night, as they sat by the fire, Elias spoke softly. "I never imagined that helping someone could lead to all of this. I don't fully understand the law, but I do understand that I want to be here, with you, learning and growing together." Ayana looked at him, her expression thoughtful. "The law brought us together, yes. But perhaps it is our hearts that will truly define what comes next." For the first time, a faint, genuine smile touched her lips. Elias returned it, feeling the warmth of connection that went beyond obligation, fear, or tradition. The forest outside was silent under the moonlight, and the village slept peacefully. Inside, two people who had begun as strangers were slowly discovering the bonds of trust, respect, and perhaps even love. And though they could not see the future, they both knew that the path ahead, shaped by ancient law, mutual care, and courage, would be a journey unlike any they had ever imagined. The days passed quietly in the village, but for Elias, they were filled with thoughts he could not easily shake. Every morning he woke to the crisp mountain air and the gentle calls of birds, but his mind often wandered to Ayana. She moved with calm assurance, her presence as natural as the snow-covered trees around them. Yet beneath her quiet exterior, Elias sensed an unspoken tension. The bond that the tribe's law had created hung over them both, a weight neither could ignore. Elias worked alongside the villagers, learning the skills that had been passed down for generations. He carried firewood through deep snow, helped in the small herbal garden behind the inn, and listened attentively to the elders as they spoke of their customs. He enjoyed the work, but it left him with little time to think. Or perhaps it was the work that gave him the space to reflect. He realized that he had never known such a close, connected community. In the cities he had traveled, people often lived in isolation, bound only by necessity and routine. Here, every action, every word, carried meaning. Ayana watched him closely. At first, her gaze had been polite but distant, as if she were unsure whether he would truly understand her people. But over the weeks, she noticed his dedication. He learned quickly, listened without judgment, and carried himself with respect. Slowly, she began to trust him, though she remained cautious. The bond of the law was clear, but what it meant in their hearts was still uncertain. One afternoon, while they were gathering herbs in the forest, Elias spoke carefully. "Ayana, may I ask you something?" She looked at him with her dark eyes, curious but calm. "Do you ever wish that the law could be different? That someone could choose whether to be bound or not?" Ayana paused, her fingers brushing over the leaves of a medicinal plant. "I have thought about it," she said finally. "Sometimes I wish it were only about choice, about hearts rather than rules. But the law is not just a rule. It is our protection, our history. It keeps our people safe, and it ensures that kindness is never wasted." Elias nodded slowly, understanding more than he expected. "I understand that it is important, and I respect it. But it still feels heavy to know that my actions, something I did without thinking, could shape my life forever. It is a lot to take in." Ayana studied him, noticing the honesty in his words. "I understand," she said softly. "The bond is heavy at first, but it can also be a source of strength. If you allow it, it can teach patience, responsibility, and even trust." She trailed off, unsure whether she should reveal more. Elias smiled faintly. "Trust, that is something I think we both need to learn, isn't it?" She nodded. For the first time, the silence between them did not feel uncomfortable. It was a shared understanding, a quiet acknowledgement of the challenges ahead. As the days grew longer, Elias found himself noticing more details about Ayana. The way her fingers moved when she worked with herbs, the careful way she measured ingredients, the small, almost imperceptible smile that appeared when she was pleased with the results. He realized that he was drawn to her not only because of the bond created by the law, but because of the person she truly was. And with this realization came a new layer of fear. What if he became attached, only to discover that the bond he felt was not fully returned? One evening, while the village gathered around the central fire for a storytelling night, the elders spoke of the history of the tribe. Elias listened intently as stories of courage, loyalty, and selflessness were told. These tales were not just entertainment, they were lessons. Every story carried the wisdom of generations, showing the villagers how to navigate the balance between law, tradition, and personal desire. After the gathering, Elias and Ayana walked through the snow-covered paths back to the inn. Silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken thoughts. Finally, Elias broke the quiet. "Ayana, do you ever feel trapped by the law? I see how you follow it, but I wonder if you sometimes wish for more freedom." Ayana's breath formed little clouds in the cold air. She looked at him, her expression unreadable.
"Yes," she admitted softly.
"Sometimes I wish I could choose entirely for myself, but I also know that the law is part of who I am. It is not only about control, it is about care, protection, and belonging. It has guided me my whole life, and it has shaped the person I am today." Elias nodded, trying to understand. "I think I'm beginning to see that. The law, it isn't just about rules. It's about relationships, responsibility, and trust. And somehow, it brought me to you."
Ayana's lips curved slightly, a small but genuine smile.
"Yes, And now that it has, we must learn how to live with it together. Over the next few days, Elias noticed subtle changes in their interactions. Ayana began to include him in more of her daily tasks, guiding him with patience as he learned the intricacies of the village's ways. He found joy in these moments, not because he was fulfilling an obligation, but because he genuinely wanted to learn from her, to be near her. He also saw glimpses of her personality that she rarely showed, her sense of humor, her quiet pride in her skills, and her deep connection to the land. Despite these positive developments, Elias could not ignore the internal struggle that continued to grow within him. He wanted to honor the bond created by the law, but he also wanted to ensure that their relationship, whatever it became, was built on mutual respect and genuine care, not just duty. He wondered how long it would take before they could fully trust each other, and whether the villagers' watchful eyes added pressure or guidance to their growing connection. One afternoon, as they returned from gathering firewood, Elias and Ayana encountered a group of children playing in the snow. Ayana's face softened, and she laughed quietly as she joined them. Elias watched her, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the firewood he carried. He realized that the law might have brought them together, but it was moments like this, small, shared joys, that would define the depth of their bond. That evening, as they prepared a meal together in the inn's small kitchen, Elias gathered the courage to speak openly. "Ayana, I want you to know that I am not here just because of the law. I am here because I want to be. I admire you, respect you, and, I hope, in time, I can earn your trust." Ayana paused, her hands stilling as she stirred the pot. She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the flickering firelight. "Elias, I see your honesty, and I see your care. That is more important than any law. The bond will teach us many things, but it is our actions, our hearts, and our choices that will truly shape what comes next." Elias felt a surge of relief and hope. For the first time, he sensed that their relationship could grow beyond obligation, that it could become something meaningful, built on trust and shared experience. He realized that love, respect, and understanding could develop even within the constraints of ancient law, if both were willing to embrace it fully. The days continued to pass, each one strengthening their connection. Elias began to notice how the villagers subtly guided him, offering advice and support while allowing him and Ayana the space to grow together. He learned that trust was not immediate. It was earned through patience, kindness, and consistent care. Ayana, in turn, observed his dedication and began to feel that perhaps the bond created by law could become a bond of choice, of mutual respect and understanding. One night, under a sky filled with stars, Elias and Ayana walked together outside the village. The cold air bit at their cheeks, but the quiet of the mountains surrounded them like a protective blanket. "Elias," Ayana said softly, "we have come far in a short time. The law brought us together, yes, but it is our hearts, our willingness to understand and care for each other that will determine what we become." Elias nodded, feeling the truth of her words deep in his chest. "I understand, and I will do everything I can to honor that, to honor you, and to honor what we have been given." Ayana smiled faintly, the first full smile since he had found her in the forest. "Then we move forward one step at a time, together." And so, as the snow settled quietly around them, two people bound by law, but beginning to bind their hearts by choice, walked side by side into an uncertain but promising future. Each step brought them closer, not just to understanding each other, but to discovering the true strength and beauty of connection, trust, and care. The morning air in the village was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and snow. Elias woke early, the excitement and nervousness of the day pressing on him. Today was the day he would begin the tribal rites, a series of challenges meant to test his courage, patience, and dedication to the bond he shared with Ayana. Although he had grown more comfortable with village life and with Ayana, he could not deny the flutter of nerves in his chest. The rites would be demanding, and he knew they were more than just a formality. They were a true measure of his character. Ayana approached him quietly, her dark eyes reflecting the early light. "Are you ready?" she asked softly. There was no judgment in her tone, only concern. Elias looked at her and nodded, though he felt uncertainty lingering. "I think I am," he replied. "But I have much to learn." The elder appeared, his presence commanding attention even in the soft morning light. "Elias," he said, "the rites are not meant to frighten you. They are meant to guide you, to understand our people, to understand Ayana, and to understand yourself. The first trial begins now." Elias followed the elder and Ayana to the edge of the forest, where a small clearing had been prepared. The first trial was a test of courage and resourcefulness. He was given only a small pack containing essentials: a knife, some dried herbs, a blanket, and a few pieces of food. His task was to travel through the forest, locate a hidden marker, and return safely by nightfall. He would be alone, relying on his knowledge, instincts, and courage to succeed. Elias took a deep breath and stepped into the forest. The trees stood tall and silent, their branches heavy with snow. Each step he took left a crisp impression in the white ground, and every sound, the distant crack of a branch, the rush of a small stream, made his heart beat faster. He reminded himself to stay calm, to think carefully, and to trust the skills he had developed while traveling. Hours passed, and Elias moved steadily through the forest, observing the signs around him. He identified edible plants, avoided areas where the snow was too deep, and used his knife to clear small branches from his path. Despite the cold and fatigue, he found himself thinking of Ayana. He imagined her watching him, silently judging, but also encouraging. This thought brought him a strange comfort. He realized that the bond they shared, though still new and fragile, gave him strength he had not known before. As the sun reached its peak, Elias finally found the hidden marker, a small wooden symbol carved into the trunk of an ancient tree. He smiled, feeling a rush of relief and accomplishment. He paused to rest, warming himself with a small fire and a cup of tea made from herbs he had collected. For a moment he allowed himself to enjoy the solitude and beauty of the forest, listening to the soft whisper of the wind through the trees. But the trial was not yet complete. As evening approached, Elias realized he had to find his way back to the village before darkness fully set in. He retraced his steps carefully, using the markers he had noted earlier. The snow had begun to fall lightly again, and the forest grew darker with each passing moment. He moved cautiously, relying on memory and instinct. Every rustle of leaves made him alert, but he kept his focus, determined not to fail. When he finally emerged from the forest, the village was bathed in the soft glow of lanterns. Villagers stood quietly at the edge of the clearing, observing him. Elias felt a mixture of relief and pride as he approached Ayana, who was waiting for him with a small, approving smile. "You made it," she said softly. "I knew you would." Elias nodded, exhausted but happy. "It was difficult," he admitted, "but I learned so much, not just about the forest, but about myself." The elder stepped forward and placed a hand on Elias's shoulder. "Courage is only one part of the bond," he said. Next, you must show patience and wisdom. These qualities are as important as bravery, for they are the foundation of trust. The second trial began immediately. Elias was asked to assist in the village with tasks that required attention to detail and careful observation. He had to identify medicinal herbs, help prepare food for the elders, and repair tools for the community. Each task was simple in concept, but it required focus, thought, and care. He worked alongside Ayana, who guided him with patience, offering advice and correcting mistakes without judgment. Through these tasks, Elias discovered new depths to the village's traditions. Every action was purposeful, every tool had meaning, and every herb held both practical and symbolic importance. He realized that wisdom was not only about knowledge, but also about respect for the land, for the people, and for the connections that bound them. Ayana watched him closely, and he could see approval in her eyes as he adapted and learned. The third and final trial was the most personal. Elias was asked to spend a full day with Ayana, not only assisting her with tasks but also listening, observing, and understanding her perspective. The goal was to demonstrate empathy, patience, and genuine care. Elias realized that this trial was not about physical skill or knowledge. It was about forming a deeper bond, a true connection that went beyond duty. Throughout the day, Elias walked with Ayana through the village, helping her with small chores, listening to her stories, and learning about her life before the forest. She spoke of her childhood, the lessons her elders had taught her, and the ways she had learned to navigate the world with courage and grace. Elias listened attentively, asking questions when appropriate, but mostly observing and reflecting. He began to understand her not just as a companion bound by law, but as a person with dreams, fears, and strengths that deserved respect and admiration. By evening, the trials were complete. Elias felt a profound sense of accomplishment, not just for completing the challenges, but for the growth he had experienced. He had faced fear, uncertainty, and exhaustion, and had emerged stronger and wiser. More importantly, he had begun to understand the depth of his connection with Ayana, and how the bond between them could be shaped by care, respect, and mutual understanding. The villagers gathered around the central fire that night, the air filled with anticipation. The elder addressed Elias first. "You have shown courage, patience, and wisdom. You have respected our people, our traditions, and most importantly, Ayana. These trials are not merely tasks, they are lessons in life, love, and trust. You have passed them all." Ayana stepped forward, her expression calm but warm. "Elias, I have seen your dedication. I have seen your respect for me, for my people, and for our bond. You have earned the right to walk this path with me, not only because of the law, but because of your heart." Elias felt a deep sense of relief and joy. The trials had tested him in ways he could never have anticipated, but they had also taught him the value of patience, understanding, and genuine care. He realized that the bond created by law had grown into something richer, deeper, and more meaningful than he had imagined. As the night sky spread its blanket of stars over the village, Elias and Ayana sat together by the fire. The bond between them was no longer just a rule of the tribe. It was a connection built on trust, respect, and shared experience. They had faced challenges together, learned from each other, and discovered the strength that could only come from genuine care and understanding. Elias looked at Ayana, her face illuminated by the firelight, and felt a quiet sense of peace. "The trials were difficult," he said softly, "but I would do them again, not because I had to, but because I wanted to be here with you, to learn and grow together." Ayana smiled, a faint but genuine expression that reached her eyes. "And I would welcome that," she replied. The bond may have begun with the law, but it is our choices, our actions, and our hearts that will shape what comes next. The villagers watched in silence, witnessing the beginning of a new chapter. What had started as obligation had transformed into understanding, respect, and the possibility of something more. Elias and Ayanna, once strangers brought together by chance and ancient law, were now partners in a journey that promised growth, discovery, and the quiet joys of companionship. The forest outside stood silent under the snow, the mountains around the village calm and majestic. Inside, two people who had faced fear, uncertainty, and challenge were beginning to understand the true meaning of connection, trust, and care. And though the path ahead would have its own trials, they now faced it together, stronger, wiser, and more united than ever. The morning air was calm, the sun rising over the snow-covered mountains and casting a soft golden light across the village. Elias awoke with a sense of quiet anticipation. The tribal rites had been completed, and the lessons learned had left him stronger, wiser, and more connected to Ayanna than ever. Today the village would formally recognize their bond, a moment both solemn and celebratory, marking the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. Elias dressed carefully in the simple traditional garments provided by the villagers. Each piece of cloth had meaning, woven with symbols of protection, strength, and unity. As he prepared, he thought of the journey that had brought him here, the cold forest, the first moment he offered warmth to a stranger, and the way that small act had grown into something far greater than he could have imagined. Ayanna approached him quietly, her movements graceful as ever. Her dark eyes met his, filled with calm understanding and a touch of anticipation. "Are you ready?" she asked softly. Elias nodded. "I am." More than ever, the villagers had gathered in the central square, the fire at its center crackling gently. Smoke rose into the clear sky, carrying the scent of pine and firewood. Children ran quietly between the adults, their laughter restrained but happy, and the elders watched with careful eyes, noting every detail. The air was filled with a mixture of excitement, respect, and anticipation. The elder stepped forward, his silver hair glinting in the morning light. "Today," he said, "we celebrate a bond that began with kindness, guided by law and strengthened by courage, patience, and understanding. Elias and Ayanna have walked a path together that few ever experience. Today we recognize their connection not only through our tradition but through the hearts and actions they have shared." Elias felt his heart pound as the elder's words washed over him. He glanced at Ayanna, who gave him a small, reassuring nod. It was as if they were silently agreeing that whatever came next, they would face it together, fully and sincerely. The ceremony began with a simple, symbolic ritual. Elias and Ayanna each held a small flame from the central fire. They approached each other slowly, the snow crunching softly beneath their feet. When they reached the center, the elder instructed them to merge their flames, symbolizing the unity of their bond. Elias looked into Ayanna's eyes as he carefully brought his flame closer to hers. When the flames met, a gentle light danced across their faces, casting shadows that seemed to weave around them like a protective embrace. The villagers watched in silence, many bowing their heads in respect. The flames flickered, representing the warmth, trust, and connection that had grown between Elias and Ayanna over weeks of shared experiences, challenges, and understanding. In that moment, Elias felt a deep sense of peace. The bond was no longer just law. It was something real, something they had nurtured together. Next came the exchange of symbols. Ayanna presented Elias with a small pendant, carved from wood and decorated with tiny patterns that represented the mountains, the forest, and the village. "This is a symbol of our bond," she said softly. "It represents trust, care, and the promise to walk this path together." Elias accepted it with gratitude, slipping it around his neck. He then offered her a small woven bracelet, crafted from threads he had learned to weave under Ayana's guidance. "This is for you," he said, "a promise that I will honor, protect, and grow with you." Ayana's eyes softened, and she accepted the bracelet. Their hands brushed gently, sending a warmth through both of them that went beyond the physical. The villagers murmured softly, pleased with the respect and care the two had shown each other. Even the children watched with quiet awe, sensing the significance of the moment. The elder then spoke again, outlining the expectations of life together. "The bond you share is not simply ceremonial. It is a commitment to care for each other, to respect the traditions of this village, and to grow together through challenges and joys alike. The law brought you together, yes, but it is your choices, actions, and hearts that will define your journey." Elias felt a deep understanding settle within him. He realized that every moment he had spent with Ayana, from the first shivering encounter in the forest to the trials and lessons of the rites, had prepared him for this. He no longer felt overwhelmed by the law or the weight of expectation. Instead, he felt a quiet confidence, grounded in experience, respect, and the bond he had nurtured with her. Ayana took a deep breath and spoke, her voice clear and calm. "Elias, I have seen your heart, your dedication, and your willingness to understand and respect both me and our people. I accept this bond not only because the law demands it, but because I trust you, and I am ready to walk this path with you." Elias's chest tightened, a mix of relief and joy flooding through him. "Ayana, I promise the same," he said. "I will honor you, support you, and cherish this bond every day for as long as we live." The villagers erupted into quiet applause and smiles, the celebration gentle but heartfelt. Children ran forward, scattering flowers around the couple, while elders placed protective charms near the ceremonial fire. The sense of community, respect, and joy was tangible, enveloping Elias and Ayana in a feeling of safety and belonging. After the ceremony, the couple walked together through the village, the snow still falling lightly around them. They spoke softly, sharing thoughts, hopes, and quiet laughter. Elias noticed that Ayana's demeanor had changed slightly, not just in trust, but in openness. She laughed more freely and moved with ease, showing glimpses of her personality that had been hidden behind caution and tradition. Elias felt honored to witness this, knowing that the bond they shared allowed her to feel safe enough to be herself. That evening, the villagers prepared a feast in their honor. Tables were set with simple but carefully prepared dishes, roasted vegetables, fresh bread, herbal teas, and stews flavored with the forest's bounty. The air was filled with laughter, stories, and songs passed down through generations. Elias and Ayana sat together, their hands brushing occasionally, feeling a sense of connection and warmth that went beyond the firelight. Elias took a moment to reflect on how far they had come. He remembered the cold forest, the first moment he offered warmth, and the uncertainty that had followed. Now, surrounded by people who valued tradition, care, and connection, he realized that his life had changed in ways he could never have anticipated. What had started as a simple act of kindness had blossomed into a deep, meaningful bond that would guide his future. Later that night, Elias and Ayana stood outside the inn, looking up at the clear, star-filled sky. The mountains rose majestically around them, and the soft glow of the village lanterns reflected in the snow. "It feels real," Elias said quietly. "Not just the law or the rituals, but everything. Us, here. Together, Ayana smiled, her eyes shining.
Yes, she said. It is real because we made it real.
The law brought us together, but our hearts and actions have shaped what comes next. This is only the beginning. Elias nodded, feeling a quiet joy settle over him. For the first time in his life, he felt fully grounded, connected to a person, a community, and a purpose that went beyond himself. The bond with Ayana was no longer a weight or a challenge. It was a source of strength, trust, and hope. They stayed there for a long while, walking side by side through the soft snow, speaking in whispers, and sharing quiet moments of laughter and reflection. The bond they had nurtured through trials, learning, and shared experiences had grown into something beautiful, something neither law nor time could diminish. As the night deepened, Elias realized that he no longer feared the future. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he and Ayana would face them together, guided by respect, trust, and the bond they had chosen to honor fully. And in that moment, surrounded by the quiet beauty of the mountains and the warmth of the village, he knew that what had begun as an act of simple kindness had become a journey of love, companionship, and shared purpose.